Hello, everyone. Welcome to our virtual back to school night. My name is Mr. Uribe, and I just wanted to take this chance to introduce myself and pretty much talk about our class and how it is run. Now, this video will work for both Algebra 1 and Geometry. So if I have your son or daughter for period 1 or period 5, I am their Algebra 1 teacher. If your son or daughter has me for periods 2, 3, or 4, I am their Geometry teacher. Both classes, the structures are run the same way, just obviously different topics, Algebra 1 versus Geometry. So I want to take this opportunity to basically kind of run through our structure, our procedures, topics that we cover in each individual class. If we scoot over next here to our next slide, just a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Mr. Uribe. I've been teaching here at Citrus Hill High School for 8 years. This is my 8th year teaching here. A little bit about my educational background. I did get my bachelor's in mathematics for secondary school teaching from UC Riverside. That's also where I received my credential and my master's in education. Recently, as last year, I got my master's in administration from GCU, from Grand Canyon University. And a little bit more about my background experience. During my undergrad, I taught at Riverside STEM Academy, Ramona High School, and Rubidoux High School. All right, so if I have, go back. If I have your son or daughter for periods 1 and 5, I am their Algebra 1 teacher. Algebra 1, it is an A through G requirement, so they do need that to get into college, and it's also a graduation requirement. So listed below, you can see some of the topics that we study in Algebra 1, so multi-step equations, linear equations, system of linear equations, operations with polynomials, solving quadratics. Those are just some of the major topics that we talk about in Algebra 1. Now, if I have your son or daughter for periods 2, 3, and 4, I am their geometry teacher. So again, geometry is also an A through G requirement. They do need that to enter college. They do need to pass this class. It is also a high school graduation requirement. And if I have your son or daughter for geometry, these are just some of the topics that we cover. So geometry vocabulary, things like transformation, congruent figures, trigonometry, similar polygons, and volume. As far as the grading policy is the same for both Algebra 1 and Geometry. We do have a midterm and final, which is worth 10% of their grade. So halfway through the semester, they will take a midterm, which covers the material up to that point. And then at the end of the semester, they will take a final, which will cover everything from the start of August until roughly towards the end of December. That is worth 10% of their grade. The next category is assessments. That includes anything from a quiz to a test. That is a big category there. That is worth 70%. And then the next one is notebook and assignment. So again, that's basically the work that they do for me in class or / their homework. I call it my class activities. That is worth 20%. So that practice that they get in class, that is worth 20% of their grade, for a grand total, of course, 100%. Because that category for assessments is worth a lot, 70%, what we're trying to get to is we're trying to make sure that our grades reflect the students' knowledge. We want to make sure that the students show mastery because it is such a high stakes, 70%. We do allow retakes on assessments. We do allow retakes on quizzes and on tests as many times as they need to. So if they don't do so well on a quiz or an exam, I do require them to come in for tutoring. I do recommend that first because, again, we can figure out what they did wrong, we can fix it, and then, of course, have them retake that assessment for hopefully a better grade. And again, they can retake assessments as many times as possible, as many times as they need. What we're trying to get at is mastery. So if it takes them three times to master it, that's okay. If it takes them once, that's also okay. Quizzes, we want to think of quizzes as almost like a progress report. So there is an entire unit of study. And so within that unit, we'll have smaller little weekly quizzes. You want to think of those as progress reports. So for example, last week, students had a quiz. This week, they have a second quiz. That second quiz replaces the first one. And we want to think of it as a progress report. Eventually, the one that will matter is the unit test. When we take that unit test, that'll be the final one, the final assessment that actually goes into the grade book. So when they're taking quizzes, if students don't do so well, that should be a red flag of, hey, I need to come in for tutoring. Now, if they've been doing really well on quiz 1, quiz 2, quiz 3 until we get to that unit test, then they're in a pretty good spot for that final exam. What we're trying to do again is make sure that their grade reflects mastery. So quizzes are our progress reports. Class activities. So the deal with my homework, I don't call, I try not to give homework things that students take home. What I like to do is normally when students come into class, there's a warm up on the board. Once we're done with the warm up, we jump into that day's lesson. Now, I like to teach somewhere between 30-35 minutes. And then I like to leave the remainder of class for students to get a head start on their homework. I call it their class activity because they have maybe the last 20 to 15 minutes to complete it. If they complete it during class, they come up to me, I check their work. If everything's perfect, they turn it in. Now, if they finish the work for that day, fantastic. They do not have any homework to take home. I understand that students have busy schedules with sports or clubs after school, so we want to make sure that we can find that nice balance. Now, if students are working on that class activity for that day, let's say there's 5 problems, but they're only able to finish the first 3, then they would have to take that assignment home, finish it up for homework, and then of course bring it back the following day. So that is my class activity / homework policy. Whatever they don't finish in class needs to be taken home and brought back the next day. Late work, given our situation with COVID, some students have to be put on quarantine, or if we're absent because we're sick or any other reason, of course. If a student is absent, yes, they can make up that day's class activity. All they would have to do is go to Google Classroom for that date, look up the assignment for that day, of course, complete it on a separate piece of paper, and bring it back to me when they return to school. So again, late work is accepted, full credit. Now, I would recommend that they turn in late assignments as soon as possible. We don't want to be working on missing assignments in December that were way back when in August. So again, if you can talk to your son or daughters of making sure that they keep track of their missing assignments if they do have any. Aries is the perfect place to go through and monitor that. So what do students need on a regular basis? I do ask them to bring their Chromebooks and their chargers. We've been trying to use technology a lot more. So their Chromebooks, they're using them as a digital notebook. That's where we take our notes. So it's important that they have a Chromebook and of course their charger, since they're using their laptops pretty much all day. Now, if students don't like to take notes on their Chromebook, they're not a big fan, some of them lost their stylus already, I always like to give them the option that they can go the good old-fashioned way of paper and pencil. So again, if they're not a fan of using their Chromebooks, they prefer pencil and paper, please, I would recommend a notebook, a spiral notebook. And again, that's where they would do their warm-ups, their notes, their class activities. So these are the materials, really: Chromebook and charger, pencil, of course, and a spiral notebook to take notes if they're not a big fan of taking notes digitally. So what if my student doesn't get it? So what are my options? What are our options? And how can we help to make sure that your son or daughter is successful and they pass Algebra 1 or geometry? I'm normally here at 7 in the morning, roughly stay until 4:15 at times. So I am available before school, after school, during lunch, and then of course SOAR. SOAR happens on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Right now, due to the pandemic, that kind of has been put on pause, but we're hoping eventually that kind of gets brought up, and I can also assist them during that Tuesday and Thursday SOAR time. There's also other digital resources. YouTube is a great place to get additional videos, resources. If you type in just that day's topic, you'll have hundreds of videos probably explaining how to do that day's work. Khan Academy is another great resource. Google Classroom, that's normally where I post my videos, my lessons for that day. And then the last one is called paper.co. We actually, the district, I believe, purchased that last year and also this year as well. Paper.co is an online live tutoring service. So again, every student has access. They just go to paper.co. If they just log in through there, they can talk to an actual live tutor, which will help them with their homework if they're ever stuck. Some students, they work at 11 o'clock at night, way past my bedtime. So obviously I will not be available, but they can always log into paper.co if they're stuck and actually receive help from an online tutor. And this is 24/7. This is 24/7. So there will always be a live tutor whenever they need it. Oh, and a couple of other things here. Thank you, of course, for coming virtually to our back to school night. Um, Contact, if you ever need to contact me, email is going to be the best way to reach me. So my email is c&uribe@valverde.edu. You could call, but normally I will be busy during the school day. Of course, I am teaching, but my extension is 32402. If you want to reach me before school or after school, I'm always available. Now, I would like to kind of take a moment to kind of also show you guys our Google Classroom and kind of that digital notebook that I was talking about earlier. So give me 1 minute to switch here. Uh, so Google Classroom, that is normally where we post everything. So here's my first period Algebra 1 class, and this is normally what gets posted on a daily basis. For example, Tuesday today, they have this PDF file which basically goes through all that day's notes. So if your son or daughter misses, if they missed Tuesday, August 31st, they can run through this PowerPoint. It's basically all the examples that we did together. And here at the very end of the slide, that is their class activity. Those are the problems that they do in class. If they don't finish, that is what becomes homework. Now, they can also click on this link up above. It's formative. It used to be called Go Formative, but that is our digital notebook. If I open up an old Go Formative, this is basically what it looks like, and this is where students are, taking, this is normally where they are taking notes, excuse me. And so the very first slide will be their warm-up question, and of course they can write all over that. They have their stylus. Following that, we go through that day's lesson. So here's a couple of slides. There's a couple of examples that we run through together. I'll have them try one. We'll do one together. And then, of course, at the end of that video is their class activity again. So here at the very end, if we open that up, those were the 6 problems that we completed on that day on August 26th. So again, that would be their class activity. Whatever they don't finish, that's what they would have to take home and bring back the following day. It works the same way if you have me for geometry. So my period 2, period 3, period 4, this is their Google Classroom, what it looks like, very similar. There is Tuesdays. These are the slides that we went through that PDF if you open it. So again, if they are absent on that day, or they can't see the board, they can always pull it up as well on their Chromebooks. But this was the PowerPoint that we went through. And of course, at the end was their class activity. And again, they also have a digital notebook through Go Formative, which is now called Formative. I have to get used to that. And if I open up an old one, it looks very similar to my Algebra 1 classes. I like to run both of them pretty much the same way. I find that structure really helps students. So at the very beginning here, we have our warm-up. We have that day's notes. It's the exact same thing that I will be posting on my board as I teach, so they can follow along and just add to their notes. And then, of course, very same thing. At the end of it, they will have their class activity, somewhere between 5 to 6 problems, depending on the difficulty. And again, what if they don't finish, that does become homework. So sometimes I'll have parents ask me, hey, Mr. Uribe, my son or daughter keeps saying that they finished their homework, they finished their homework, they finished their homework. Yes, they can finish their homework in class. I would still highly recommend that we monitor that through Aries. So once again, there's my contact information. It is a pleasure to have your student in my class. So thank you so much. If you need to reach out to me, please do not hesitate. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.